What made a TikTok mom destroy her own family? Sometimes the people we trust the most carry the darkest secrets. Sarah Miller was known as the perfect mom on TikToks, smiling in every video, baking cakes with her kids, showing off a life that millions admired. But behind those cheerful clips was a secret history of theft, lies, and obsession. And one summer night, Sarah didn't just lose control. She took the lives of the very family that made her famous. She looked like a woman who had everything figured out. To strangers scrolling through TikTok, her life seemed warm, joyful, and carefully organized. The clips she posted showed her decorating cupcakes with her children, setting up cozy holiday decorations, and smiling through silly dances in the kitchen. Followers admired her glow and called her a supermom. They believed they were watching an honest portrait of a happy family. Yet behind those staged moments was a secret life that no filter could hide forever. The cheerful mother who built her fame on love and laughter was carrying a darkness that no one around her had fully understood. As investigators pieced together her story, a disturbing pattern began to unfold. Years earlier, long before the cameras and the followers, she had been accused of stealing small items from places she worked. Nothing dramatic at first: strings, scarves, even wallets left unattended. The incidents were dismissed as mistakes or misunderstandings, but the whispers followed her from job to job. Old acquaintances remembered her as someone who always seemed to have money troubles, yet appeared with sudden luxuries she could not explain. Friends lent her money and never saw it again. Relatives discovered missing belongings after she visited. It was never enough for her to simply get by. She wanted more, and she wanted people to believe she deserved it. When she created her TikTok account, it was the perfect chance to rewrite her story. She was no longer the woman with a questionable past. She became a smiling mother of two, a wife who kept her home spotless, a creator who made life look like a magazine cover. Brands began to notice her polished videos, and her followers grew quickly. But success carried a heavy cost. She needed to keep up appearances, to show more, to buy more, to convince the world she was thriving. The deeper she went into this role, the more fragile her real life became. Her husband began noticing inconsistencies. Packages arrived with expensive clothes and cosmetics that they had never budgeted for. Bank accounts showed strange withdrawals. He asked questions, but she always had quick answers: sponsorships, gifted items, favors from friends. Privately, he started doubting her. Neighbors saw the tension growing inside the house that once looked so perfect on screen, but no one expected where it would lead. The night it happened, everything appeared calm from the outside. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, the quiet of a typical suburban evening, yet inside, a terrible decision had been made. By morning, the house was a crime scene. Police officers walked into rooms filled with children's toys and birthday photos, only to discover lifeless bodies where joy had once been. The woman at the center of it all sat in silence, showing no panic, no tears. Her arrest shocked the world. Fans who had watched her bake cookies and dance with her children struggled to accept the headlines. The perfect mom had become a killer, and as her past of theft and manipulation surfaced, a chilling truth became clear. The image she built online was never real. It was a mask, one that cracked under the weight of secrets, lies, and an obsession with control that cost her everything. The more investigators dug into her past, the more they uncovered stories that had been buried beneath the polished surface of her online image. Years before she was known as the cheerful TikTok mom, she was just another young woman in a small town with a reputation for being charming but not entirely trustworthy. People recalled incidents that, at the time, seemed like small mistakes or lapses in judgment. A missing bracelet here, a vanished $20 bill there, things that were easy to brush aside. Yet when those memories were laid out together, a pattern began to form, one that painted a very different picture of the woman who would later become a household name online. At one point, she worked in a small jewelry shop, trusted with cleaning and organizing display pieces. One afternoon, several rings disappeared, replaced with empty holders. She claimed she had misplaced them, and the store owner, not wanting scandal, let her go without pressing charges. To outsiders, it looked like a minor error, nothing worth dragging into court. The truth was, she had quietly pawned the pieces for quick cash. That episode became one of many whispered stories that never reached official records, but remained in the memories of those who knew her. Relatives spoke about family gatherings where wallets went missing, or cash envelopes prepared for birthdays would suddenly be lighter than before. cousins noticed small possessions vanishing after her visits: perfume bottles, earrings, even electronic gadgets. Each time, she brushed it off with excuses so convincing that no one dared to confront her directly. She had a way of twisting suspicion back onto others, making people feel guilty for doubting her. Over the years, this repeated cycle left a trail of uneasy memories, though nothing that tied her to a criminal record. What unsettled investigators most was not the theft itself, but the mindset it revealed. These were not acts of desperation alone, they were acts of control. Each stolen object gave her a strange sense of power, as if she were rewriting her place in the world through manipulation. The thrill was not in the items, but in the ability to take, to deceive, to win against the rules others lived by. When she entered the world of social media, this same hunger for control transformed into a new form. Instead of stealing jewelry or cash, she began stealing attention, admiration, and validation. She had learned early that appearances mattered more than truth, and TikTok gave her the perfect stage to showcase that lesson. By then, the old stories of theft were far behind her, hidden in the past where few could reach them. To a growing audience, she was no longer the girl whispered about at family events. She was a symbol of motherhood, creativity, and joy. Yet the past has a way of clinging to people who never truly change. Those quiet acts of theft, forgotten by most, were early warnings of something deeper inside her. They revealed a woman willing to take what she wanted, regardless of the cost. And while the world adored her for her wholesome image, those who once lost to her lies could see the shadow that had always been there, waiting to resurface. The night that changed everything began like any other. Neighbors recalled seeing the glow of kitchen lights through the window and hearing faint laughter from the backyard earlier in the evening. Nothing seemed unusual, nothing hinted at the storm that was about to break inside the walls of that suburban home. To the world outside, it was an ordinary night in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, it became the setting for one of the most haunting crimes the town had ever witnessed. Investigators later pieced together how carefully she had planned the events of that night. She had spent weeks preparing, searching online for combinations of household chemicals, and reading about doses strong enough to end a life without immediate suspicion. This was not a crime of passion or a sudden outburst of rage. It was deliberate, calculated, and executed with chilling precision. While her children played in the living room that afternoon and her husband relaxed after work, she had already set her plan in motion. The poison was disguised in drinks, a subtle bitterness masked by sugar and flavoring. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no desperate attempt to escape. Each family member had trusted her completely, accepting what she gave them without hesitation. That trust became the very weapon she used against them. By nightfall, the house that once echoed with playful noise had fallen silent. Bedrooms that should have been filled with gentle breathing now held only an unnatural stillness. What shocked investigators most was not just the act itself, but the eerie calm that followed. When officers entered the house during the welfare check, they found her sitting alone in the living room, motionless, her face unreadable. There were no frantic calls for help, no attempt to cover her tracks, no signs of remorse. It was as if she had accepted the inevitability of the flashing lights that would soon fill her driveway. The woman who had spent months perfecting a smiling image for TikTok had let the mask slip entirely, showing nothing but emptiness in its place. The crime scene was heartbreaking. Children's drawings still hung on the refrigerator. Half-finished school projects sat on the dining table. Their shoes were neatly lined up by the door, ready for the next day that would never come. The ordinary details of family life stood in sharp contrast to the horror investigators had discovered. Even seasoned officers described it as one of the most unsettling cases of their careers, not because of the violence of the act, but because of how quiet it was, how carefully it had been carried out in a space meant for safety and love. In the hours that followed, news of the tragedy spread quickly. Friends and neighbors gathered outside the house, confused and devastated. None of them could reconcile the cheerful woman they had seen dancing in videos with the suspect now sitting in the back of a police car. The crime shattered not only a family, but also the illusion she had built so carefully for the world to see. The investigation that followed peeled away every layer of her carefully built life, exposing secrets she had worked tirelessly to bury. Detectives combed through the house, searching for clues that might explain why a woman who appeared so devoted to her family would commit such an act. They collected receipts, notebooks, electronic devices, and financial records. What emerged was not the picture of a happy, stable home, but of a household quietly crumbling under lies and pressure. Her financial life was in ruins. Bank accounts showed overdrafts, maxed out credit cards, and purchases far beyond what the family could afford. Luxury items displayed in her TikTok videos, designer bags, high-end makeup, expensive decor had been bought with borrowed money or taken without permission. Detectives traced some of the purchases to stolen identities and fraudulent transactions, connecting her present crimes to the same manipulative behavior that had haunted her past. Then came the journal. Hidden in a drawer under stacks of photo albums, it contained chilling confessions disguised as everyday reflections. At first glance, the pages were filled with ordinary thought, meal plans, schedules, notes about her children. But as investigators read further, a darker tone emerged. Entries hinted at resentment toward her husband, describing him as someone who questioned her too often and threatened to ruin everything. There were references to her fear of exposure, to her terror that the truth about her debts and stolen items would finally come out. One line stood out to detectives: "They don't understand that I built this life and I refuse to lose it." The motive became clearer. Her husband had begun to question where the money was going and how she was affording the lavish items she flaunted online. He had even spoken to a close friend about separating from her and possibly taking custody of children. To her, this was not just a personal loss. It was the collapse of the identity she had created for the public. The family wasn't only her reality, they were props in the story she told the world. Losing them would mean losing control of everything. Investigators also examined her digital footprint. Internet history revealed searches about poison, about life insurance policies, and about how long certain substances stayed in the body. She had watched crime documentaries, not as entertainment but as research. Her social media drafts showed a mix of staged videos and half-finished captions, some of which were written hours before the murders. The disturbing part was how normal those drafts seemed: recipes, cleaning hacks, cheerful family updates. Proof that she was crafting content for her followers even as she planned the crime. For the police, every new discovery added another piece to the portrait of a woman who was not simply overwhelmed or impulsive, but calculating and determined. She had stolen money and possessions for years, but now she had stolen lives to protect the illusion she valued more than reality. The TikTok account that once inspired admiration became haunting evidence, each cheerful clip replayed in the courtroom as a reminder of the mask she wore. The trial became a spectacle unlike anything the small town had ever witnessed. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, some out of curiosity, others out of disbelief, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman they had once followed online. Reporters filled the sidewalks, microphones ready, repeating the phrase that had now gone viral: "The TikTok mom who killed her family." Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with grief and unease. The prosecution laid out its case step by step, showing the jury not only the details of the crime, but also the years of deceit that led to it. Her TikTok videos played on a large screen for all to see. Clips of her baking cookies with her children or laughing in her living room were no longer heartwarming. They were unsettling. Every smile, every cheerful wave to the camera seemed sinister in hindsight, a mask hiding her darker truth. The jury watched as prosecutors contrasted those staged moments with the evidence of her thefts, debts, and careful research into poisoning. The woman who once captured hearts with her perfect home and family was now framed as a manipulator who destroyed everything to maintain control. Witnesses testified one after another. Old friends recounted money they had lent her that was never returned. Relatives told stories of missing jewelry and electronics. Former employers spoke about items that disappeared under her watch. Each testimony painted the same picture: a woman who had spent her entire life taking from others without remorse. But what silenced the courtroom most was the testimony from her husband's close friend, who revealed that the husband had been planning to leave. He had discovered inconsistencies in the finances and was considering exposing her lies. That possibility, prosecutors argued, was the trigger for her final and irreversible act. Her defense team tried to argue that she was overwhelmed, trapped by financial stress and mental health struggles, but Evidence was too strong. The careful planning, the online searches, the measured doses, all pointed to intention, not desperation. Even her silence in the courtroom worked against her. She showed little emotion, sitting motionless as witnesses described her children, their bright futures stolen in a single night. To the jury, her detachment seemed chilling rather than tragic. When the verdict was announced, guilty on all counts, the courtroom was utterly still. Then came the muffled sobs of relatives, the relieved sighs of neighbors, the scribbling of reporters rushing to capture the moment. She was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. For a woman who had once thrived on the eyes of strangers watching her life online, the punishment was a cruel irony. She would now spend the rest of her days unseen, her story told only as a warning. Outside, the world reacted with shock and betrayal. Followers who once admired her deleted their supportive comments, their cheerful emojis replaced with disbelief. Some couldn't bring themselves to watch her old videos anymore, while others replayed them with a morbid curiosity, searching for signs they had missed. The house where she filmed her clips stood empty, its windows dark, a place people passed quickly without looking. What was once seen as a home of joy had become a monument to deceit and tragedy. Her downfall became a cautionary tale. It was no longer just about one woman's crime, but about the dangers of curated perfection, the risks of believing everything we see online. Behind her filters and staged smiles lay years of theft, lies, and ultimately, murder. She had stolen from her community, stolen trust from her loved ones, and finally stolen the lives of the very people she had built her brand upon. And in the end, she lost everything: her family, her freedom, and the identity she had worked so hard to sell to the world.